Hello, everyone. I think we're about ready to start. Let me just put up the risk warning just to explain what this is if you haven't seen them before. Um, for the next couple of weeks, 3 times a week, we're doing a market outlook at 12:30. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Let me just bring up the risk warning while I'm talking. And it's a look at really the major events to watch in the days ahead for markets, the big levels to keep an eye on. It probably shouldn't take more than 15, 20 minutes just to whiz through these markets for 3 days a week, see where we are, and see what's happening. Today, we're going to look at pound, the euro, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, DAX, and gold and oil. But I think with a particular focus on the pound and the euro. No, sorry, the pound, the euro, and also the S&P 500. I think those could be really the three interesting markets to watch this week. So I think that risk warning has been up for long enough. So let me just drag the trading platform over and just sort that out. Let me get rid of some of this stuff so I can do it full screen. Okay. Let's start off with pound US dollar. It's really quiet at the moment. Clearly, we have all of the Brexit negotiations or lack of progress or progress or whatever it is going on at the moment. And on top of that, if you're not in the UK, there is quite a lot of political unrest, shall we say, at the top of UK government. This weekend, a big story in the papers was that apparently the Prime Minister in the UK, Theresa May, has got 3 days to prove that she's worthy of doing the job. Let's see what happens this week. But all of this stuff with Brexit and politics really has made the pound particularly volatile. But I think what's interesting going into this week, and it is interesting that it's actually weakened today. Let's just pick up first of all on what's been going on with the price action. So if we pick up on the recovery from August, so we are we're 2 months into this now. Why can't I click on that? What's going on? Sorry, hang on. I think my I've got a bit of a Monday morning effect going on my fingers. So we've got, there we go. So I'm looking really at this recovery from these lows in August. Okay, looking something like that. Okay, let's just focus on that. So we had that big sell-off through the summer and from April, where the pound went from 143 against the dollar as low as briefly below 127. In the middle of August. Since then, we've had this recovery. So the market's bounced back at its highest point. It bounced back about 600 points. And then we saw it sell off early October down to 129, then back up to 132.5. Where we ended last week and where we are now, I think it's really interesting. If we just, again, we'll look at the indicators in a minute, but let's just focus on the price action on the daily chart for now. If we're looking at this trend line, I don't think trend lines are absolute gospel. They don't work all the time, but I think it's always a good idea to put a trend line on the chart so you know actually what sort of trend you're trying to follow here. So we do have this trend line support coming in around about 130, and it's done a pretty good job over the last couple of months of stopping any weakness. At the moment, you can see the pound is trading 130, just above 130.20. So 130. It's a big level to watch. We saw it come down to 130.15 on Thursday of last week. Bit of a bounce back on Friday, and we're weaker again today. So I think the immediate level to watch for pound US dollar is 130 to see if this trend's going to stop it. After that, we also have support from back here as well. After that, we're looking at 129. 129 has been really big support for pound US dollar on the way up. Going back to here, something like that. We had the lows in early September, lows again early October. So this whole 129 to 130 is the big level to watch this week. So for me, for my money, I'd be expecting a bounce off here. But let's see what happens. We've started the week pretty weak. Probably that chatter over the weekend about the political situation in the UK not really helping things there. So we've seen the pound under a little bit of pressure. We'll have a look at the shorter term chart in a minute. Looking at the oscillators on the daily chart, I don't think it's telling us that much. We've got the RSI about 42%, so pretty much in the middle. MACD gave a sell signal up here a few days ago, and it's still in that. So for me, it's all about how does the price perform in this zone. Let's take a look on the hourly charts. Just have a look at this. Here we go. So we can see this all in a bit more detail. Okay, so here's that recovery coming in off those August lows. This is where we are now. You can see how 130 last week we did see the price turn away from here. And then we've got support there at 130, and there's the bigger support coming in at 129. So I think one approach here, if we think the weakness today is overdone, the market's gone from 7 o'clock this morning around about 130.90 down as low as 130.25 now. If we think this sell-off is overdone, then there's arguably a buy signal coming up soon. Clearly none of this is financial advice, but looking at what's going on with the price, if it's going to bounce from anywhere, we're pretty much in the zone. So, what would you wait for? I would suggest we're looking at an hourly chart here. In the current hour, so between 12 and 1 o'clock, let's just zoom in. It's still making fresh lows, right? So it's a market that is still weak at the moment. So one of the things I tend to look for, if I'm looking to trade it the other way, so looking for buying into weakness, I want to see it stop going down for a start. So I want at least 1 hour where it doesn't make new lows. Yeah. And in the last 4 hours, we're not getting that. So I think for me, it's one to keep an eye on this afternoon to see if we see some more stability come in ahead of 130. And then probably for me, a logical place for a stop loss would be below these old lows. So these old lows, this is the tightest I'd want to stop. These old lows are 130 from October the 4th. Let's see what happens this afternoon. So maybe, stop loss, I don't know, 129.85, something like that, assuming the price stops going down at some point this afternoon. But I think it's a big zone to watch. You can see it now on the hourlies, how 129 held the price up early September. The market rallies up 400 points, comes back down to 129.24. Early October, rallies back up, and I think the first support to watch now is this 130 zone. So let's see what happens. It's still weak. If we flip it over to the 5 minutes, maybe it's recovered a little bit. It's bounced back a little bit over the last 15 minutes or so. But for me, it is the shortest time frame I'd want to watch at the moment is that hourly chart, and let's see if it stops going down for an hour. So for me, that's definitely a market to watch this afternoon. In terms of events for this week, it's more loaded towards the back end. On Thursday, we've got the latest European interest rate decision. So the ECB rate decision Thursday lunchtime, 12:45. Then we've got the interest rate, the press conference from 1:30, and that normally can contribute some fireworks from that press conference, depending on what they say. Then on Friday, we've got US GDP numbers coming out. So it's a bit of a quieter start to the week in terms of economic events, but it does pick up as the week goes on. So for me, 130 is the first one to watch on the pound. So maybe an interesting market to look at this afternoon. Let's take a look at the euro, because the euro is maybe not quite as interesting, but still, I think there are some obvious levels to watch. There's a video going up a bit later today on our YouTube channel where I look at the euro and the pound in a bit more detail. But looking at the euro, look at the last, the last 4 months on euro dollar. We're stuck in what is pretty much a broad sideways range. It broke a lot lower in August, bounced back, but hasn't really done anything since then. So we're still in the middle of this range. And I think for this week on euro dollar, like the pound, a short-term level to watch is the low 114s. If we flip this over to an hourly chart, take a look at this. Here we go. So we can see what a good job this sort of weakness to 114 has done in terms of setting up buying opportunities. We were down here October the 9th, market rallies, came back down almost to pretty much the exact level October the 19th, end of last week, and we've bounced back. So it's bounced as high as 115.50 today, already given up a chunk of those gains. So I think where the euro is going to be interesting is if it starts moving back to maybe 114.60. We've seen buyers come in ahead of 114 for the euro. So for me, that is the level to watch out for. Okay, so maybe not quite as interesting as the pound, but still an obvious one to look out for. I think the other interesting market this week are stock markets. We're still in earnings season for the US. We've got some of the tech companies announcing later this week. I think Twitter is on Thursday, so we'll see how things are going for Twitter. I think also Google is later this week as well. But lots of US earnings coming out this week. So let's just take a look. Take a look at the S&P, then we'll take a look at the Nasdaq. I think what is interesting here, it did slip a bit lower overnight because clearly it's a 24-hour market, but it has bounced back. This is a daily chart. So again, let's start with the dailies. Actually, it's had a really strong bounce back so far. But we had that big sell-off the second week of October. So markets, relatively speaking, fell off a cliff. You know, it's the sharpest sell-off we've seen since February of this year. Fell off a cliff. The S&P slipped as low as 27.10. And then over the last couple of weeks or so, it's been trying to stage a recovery. And it was going all right until the second half of last week, where it sold off, you know, and we saw the market under a bit of pressure. And some of the levels I was looking at for this week, really looking for buyers to come back in and for this strength to hold. So this is the hourly chart. This is the sell-off. The market struggled for a few days after the sell-off, as you'd expect, as everyone tries to decide, is this the start of a crash or is this just a great buying opportunity? And then October the 16th pushes high. So this was just over, it was last Tuesday, wasn't it? Last Tuesday, see on the hourly chart, just this procession of gains every hour. So a really strong performance last Tuesday, breaks back above 2,800. All looks good. Quiet today as the week goes on, and then slid a bit on, when was that? I think that was last Wednesday. And then fairly weak day on Friday. It slid overnight in the 24-hour market, but it has bounced back. So I think for me, for stock markets going into this week, any weakness for now is still a buying opportunity. And I think that the bit to figure out is, have we seen the lows? Yeah. So after that relatively big sell-off, are the lows in place? So there are levels to watch. You know, 27.40, the lows from a week ago, just before the market really ramped higher. I think that's the first one to watch. It slipped as low as 27.50-ish, 27.49 overnight. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of days, because I think stock markets are still nervous after that sell-off. And for me now, it's all about, right, how do they perform if the market comes under pressure? But for my money, would be more on a run back up to have a look at 2,800 plus, 2,820, that sort of area, rather than making new lows. But let's see. You know, I think there are some obvious pockets of support to watch a bit below where we are now. You know, and I think the obvious one to watch going into today is the overnight low at 27.48. And also, if I flip this over to a 5-minute chart, Friday's lows. Where are Friday's lows here? Around about 27.60. So let's see what happens. We've got a really strong bounce back. You know, it slipped as low as 27.50 and it's bounced back now to 27.80 overnight. This is even before the market has opened. You know, so we are seeing, for the start of the week, some more strength in stock markets. Let's see what happens. But let's take a look at the Nasdaq. Have I got that on my list? No. Let's take a look at the Nasdaq. Then we'll have a look at the DAX, the German market. Then we'll look at gold and oil to wrap things up, because gold is still an interesting one. So here's our Nasdaq chart. So there's the move in the Nasdaq on the daily chart from about 7,700 as low as, how low did it get? About 6,900. So a 10% slide, 10% plus side in the Nasdaq. Again, like the other markets, sold off last week, but interestingly, did hold above those lows. Let's take a look on the hourly chart. Just again, how important I do think these previous lows are. So for the Nasdaq, it looks like the overnight sell-off has just about, held ahead of the lows before the big move on Friday. So going into this afternoon, okay, it's trading at 71.59 now. If we did see any weakness, I think this 7,040, 7,050 area is one to watch when markets start trading properly at 2:30 this afternoon UK time. So in a little under 2 hours. But for now, it does still feel as if, even though these markets are nervous, there's still an appetite to be a buyer on weakness. And I think we've got some obvious levels to watch there on the Nasdaq. The first one being 7,040. So look at the DAX. The DAX had, I think, a bit of a gap higher this morning, and let's have a quick look at that. Let me just show you on the 5-minute chart. There we go. So that was Friday's close, the market opened this morning and did gap higher, because US markets were moving higher in the out of hours market, traded up, slipped back almost 100 points, and we have seen it continue to recover. So again, for the DAX, if we have a look at the daily view, at big levels are these old lows, which are more than 200 points away from where we are now, but the DAX can do 200 points very quickly. I suppose encouragingly, if we're looking for the bullish argument, we got the MACD down here starting to turn up. If we saw maybe a couple of days more strength in the DAX, we get a buy signal off the MACD. RSI has been oversold and is moving higher. And there we go. I think we've got some short-term levels from the end of last week around about 11,480, 11,500 to watch on the DAX. So stock market's a bit of a wobble overnight, but so far strong going into the start of the week. Let's wrap things up by looking at oil and gold. Oil has been an interesting one because it slipped below $70. It's the first time, this is US crude I'm talking about here. So it's the first time we've been below 70 for about a month. I think it's the beginning of September. But so far, at least, it doesn't change that bigger picture view of just a recovery off those lows from June of last year. If I can just click on and draw my line, there we go. So we still have our trend on oil chugging away, that big trend that's been in place for 16 months now. So big levels to watch for the week in oil. I suggest first of all the lows from the end of last week, about $68.50. Then we've got the lows 67.70. Then we've got these lows 66.5. So from 66.5 through to 68.5, there has been a lot of support for oil. So I think that's another interesting one to watch this week. It's come off about 10% off those highs, but as we've seen all the way through this fantastic uptrend, the sell-offs have just ended up being buying opportunities. So I think oil trading below 70 is an interesting one. And if we're going to assume that trend's going to hold, then the target would be for a run back up to those highs up at $76, $77, assuming that these old supports from 68.5 continue to hold, 66.5 continues to hold. And finally, gold. So gold, I talked about this a lot last week because it broke out. There's the arrow that I delete every time, and it just refuses to go away. So it broke out of its downtrend finally in the last couple of weeks. It's holding for now. It's been pretty quiet since the breakout over the last week. It's holding for now around about 12.20, 12.25 an ounce. I think where it gets interesting is if it comes under a bit of pressure from here. Where do we see the buyers come back in? There's lots of support from 1180 through to 1200 psychological support. So I think gold, if it gets knocked back a bit this week, starts to become a bit more interesting. But I think maybe the more immediate one to watch before US markets open is this one, the pound, because we're back down to what has been historically big support running from 130. So it's going to bounce from anywhere. That's the level to watch. And then from 230 onwards, when US markets open properly, I think that could be an interesting afternoon. At the moment, we're going into them quite strong, but they have been really volatile. So let's see what the rest of the day brings. We'll do all this again on Wednesday. So we'll do an update Wednesday, 12:30, see where things are, what's happening, all that sort of stuff. To find out more about the company, as usual, go to Capital.com. You can open an account, download a demo, see what markets we offer, all that sort of stuff. Any questions about today, drop me an email. My email address is david.jones@capital.com. And you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jones the Markets for updates during the day. And we've recently put more content on our YouTube channel. Normally, there's something goes up every day looking at a market. And I think later this week, some sort of psychological trading bias videos will go up. So make sure you're subscribed to get notified of that. But for today, we'll wrap things up there. We'll see how that pound performs this afternoon, whether 130 holds. And then we'll do this all again in a couple of days' time.